Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Fortnightly Dispatch, brought to you by the Baker Street Irregulars. I'm Steve Doyle, and I'm your host. Well, we need to get right to it today because we have a guest with so many things to talk about that I know we're going to run right up against the end of our time. Today, we are greeting a good friend of mine, Charles Prepolec, an active Sherlockian from Canada, who I am very happy can join us today. Charles is as a writer, an editor. He's had a history in book publishing, book selling. He's been an active Sherlockian for more than 30 years with memberships in the Bootmakers of Toronto, the Sherlock Holmes Society of London, and the Baker Street Irregulars. So without any further ado, hello, Charles, and welcome to the show today.
Hi, Steve. It's good to be here.
I'm very grateful to see you. It's nice to be back on this side of the microphone with a good friend of mine. So I'm grateful for the experience of seeing you today. It's been a while since we've been able to visit, so this is a real treat.
It has. I've been looking forward to this.
Well, Charles, we have so much. There's so many things. First of all, I think you and I have a lot of overlapping interests. And
I would agree. Yeah. From the movies, the horror, the sci-fi, the books, Sherlock Holmes. He pops up too.
He pops up occasionally. So right, let's just dive in. But first, we're always going to start with our standard questions. Where are you coming to us from today?
Well, today and most days for the last year and a half, I'm essentially coming from my home office here in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And I'd like to be surrounded with all my things. So.
Yes, we have that in common too. Now, where is for our viewers who may be geographically challenged when it comes to Canadian geography, where is Calgary?
Well, Calgary's kind of in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. We are, the second westernmost province. We're basically directly north of Montana, actually. So yeah, just north of Montana.
Got it. So, John, and the second question I always am interested in talking to people about is how people find their way to Sherlock Holmes. How do they fall under that spell of the great detective? So how did that happen to you?
Well, for me, it goes back to, well, not that far, but like most good things in my life, it starts with comic books, reading, that sort of thing. Big, huge fan of comic books, got into the entire mythology element, found myself reading about Greek myths, Egyptian myths, and Norse mythology. So develop a sort of a hero kind of fascination. And then that, from the comic books, took me into Doc Savage, of all things. So we ended up with Doc Savage, The Shadow, and...
I actually get that.
Yeah, I can understand that. I can imagine you would, but it's
the path there, yeah.
Yeah, the Doc Savage stuff, and then from there, that kind of took me into a Phil Farmer book, Doc Savage: His Apocalyptic Life, which has all these family trees, the old Newton universe thing, and there's this Sherlock Holmes guy on one of the branches, and we, I take an interest in that, and then there was. Of course, the Rathbone and Bruce stuff on television, none of which really fazed me. Again, we're talking about me, say, 1974, 75, 76 even. And so I'm 10 years old. I go through this stuff, and then there's that Sherlock Holmes thing. So I thought, okay, I got to investigate this. Which one am I going to investigate? Read The Hound of the Baskervilles. Most frustrating thing to a 10-year-old is, here's this hero guy. He's supposed to be really amazing, really interesting, and he's not in this book for about 70% of the thing, right? So as a 10-year-old, I was unimpressed, went back to reading whatever I was reading, and pretty much forgot about Sherlock Holmes. Although he kept popping up. That shadow thing led me to, Otto Penzler has a hand in all this somewhere, very early on.
He has a lot to answer for.
the private lives of private eyes, spies, crime fighters, and other good guys. I picked it up because there was a thing in there on shadow films, the old serials and stuff. But again, there in that list, there's a Sherlock Holmes chapter. And so it just kept coming. But then I ended up forgetting about it for about 10 years. Mid 80s hits. I'm still a comic book geek. I'm following the artwork of Gene Day. He was doing Master of Kung Fu and some other things. And then he passed away, and his brothers, Dan and David Day, they had a very similar style, and they were doing a lot of material that was similar to what Gene was doing. So I was following the art. And I walk into a comic store one day, and there's those Renegade Press first issue of Cases of Sherlock Holmes with art by Dan and David Day. So as a comic book geek, I see this thing. I'm like, oh, this artwork's fantastic. Oh, good. There's not even word balloons. All the text is down the sides. It's uncluttered. It's beautiful. And from there, one thing leads to another. You're in a bookshop, and it's like, oh, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. These, the first dozen stories. And
Yes.
maybe I should actually read, the books themselves. And then the timing got really good. I'd also had a bad breakup with a girlfriend that I'd been involved with for like 2.5 years. So I buy this Adventures, sit down, open it up, first words, first page, to Sherlock Holmes, she is always the woman. And yes, to my heartbroken self, this was like, oh, yeah, this meant the world to me. And that's how I got started on Sherlock Holmes. And then, of course, being a collector by nature, it was just, oh my God, everything, there's just so much. You get a hold of the world bibliography, and you get a hold of the bearings.
I know, it's like overwhelming when you first start looking. It's like, because it's everywhere and everything, right? I mean, it's where do I go?
And the thing is, of course, I mean, this is the mid 80s. At the same time, you've got the Jeremy Brett series had just started airing on PBS or something. And as soon as my interest hit, it's like, oh, right, this stuff's on TV. Let's watch this. First episode, what do I see? The final problem. I hadn't read the story yet in the adventure.
Hey, where's my spoiler alert?
Yeah, so I'm like, what? First episode I see Sherlock Holmes dies? It was just kind of crazy. Yeah. And then you get into it, and then the collecting, and then the wide world of it. When you start seeing, was it the World Bibliography, or was it Baring Gould that has all the listings of all these societies all over the world?
I think that was in the end of, I know there is a list like that in the end of the Baring Gould annotated. Right. So, many of us went on to find science societies, at least the first contact science societies, from that list. And
well, that's the thing. As soon as I saw that list, I started writing letters. Here's this, I don't know anything about the wide world of Sherlock Holmes, but wow, here's this guy in Japan. Here's this one in Australia. Here's this one in Germany. What do they all do? So I started sending letters, the old manual handwritten. Right. There's no internet. You couldn't just...
Kids, there was a day when there was no internet.
And from there, it just became fun. And of course, going to local bookstores, there were only 2 antiquarian shops in Calgary back in the day. There's only one now, but the one Aquila Books, Cameron there was a flyer packed up there about a local Sherlock Holmes group. So of course, after a little while there, made contact, and I think my first meeting was September of '87. I think that's it. So that was my first real introduction to other people who had an interest in this.
So let me ask you, talking about our community, we'll come back to some of the things that I want to talk to you about. But, the Sherlockian community, I mean, I'm sure you can vouch for this. Many other areas of other areas of interest have communities of fans and people who are very active in it. Science fiction, various stripes of science fiction fans and fandom, and horror, and but in my opinion, and I'm not, this could just be me, but there's something unique about the Sherlock Holmes community, I think. Do what do you think about that? Do you have an opinion about
I
that?
would agree. I would agree in a big way. I mean, I've been involved with local Calgary Star Trek groups in the past. That was fun and interesting. And they're all, I mean, it doesn't matter what fandom you're involved with, technically, the people are generally wonderful. But the Sherlockian world, I don't know what the appeal really, there's something about that element of history, the literary end of it. I don't know. It's not just like some sort of a book character. There's so much there. You've got the Victorian world to look at, and you can come at it from so many different directions. It's absurd. But there's also a certain kind of, or there was a certain kind of formality to it that appeals to me.
Yeah,
It's all things are in their place and in their way. And I don't know, it's not that I'm completely OCD about a lot of things, but I like that you know where you're at when you're dealing with a semi-formal kind of regimented, structured organization. And again, though, the people are absolutely wonderful in all the fandoms I've ever had anything to do with. But there is something special about our Sherlockian one. It just attracts so many professionals that bring their own unique spin and their own experiences and skill sets to it. And it creates this amazing diversity of information that's just fascinating to delve into. So I agree. There's something very special about our Sherlockian community.
yeah. I like to ask that question of people who I know are very active in the community because I mean, you'd think I would be over it or I would get it now, but I'm continuously kind of amazed and grateful at how wonderful the larger community is. And I just want to make sure it's not just me. It's like,
Oh, I wouldn't think so. I mean, it's everywhere you go. I mean, right from the get-go, the first time I ever traveled somewhere where I knew there was another Sherlockian. I think I took a trip down to Colorado with a girlfriend at the time. She had family. And here I am in Denver, and Johnny Stevenson at that time was putting out his little newsletters that were just a treasure trove for collectors, right? Again, pre-internet, obviously. And so it was like, okay, I'm going down to Denver. I'm going to do something ridiculous. I'm going to call up a perfect stranger and say, hey, can I come visit you? Just because. And I did. And it was wonderful. This is not something I do easily, going somewhere and just sort of going, hey, I'm coming to town. You need to see me. And we've never met.
but it happens. Oh, it happens. Yeah, it does. I've done it. I've been on the receiving end, and
Yeah.
people have called me, but I've also called them. So, or
Yeah.
nowadays,
Yeah. It's the
yeah,
same sort of thing here,
that's
too.
great. So good. Well, let's get back. I want to ask you. I think the first thing that brought you to my attention was your website. You had a website. I don't know. Is it still up and running? Was the Baker Street Dozen? I remember that website from. I think I first saw it early 2000s, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
that sounds about right. Yeah.
yeah, and I remember it had like glowing green letters, and it was very much. I think this is the thing that really attracted me personally was that it had a very large slant toward homes in media, film, television, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
And
television and film, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
that was my personal interests and stuff. At the time, we really didn't see much of that. I mean, you ended up with Sherlockian.net was out there. There was Sherlockatron. There was a lot of that sort of very heavily data-driven material that was really just lists. And I was, yeah, the media thing. I mean, the glowing green. I took things so
I loved
seriously.
it.
And it was like, oh, well, keep the memory green. Keep the memory green. Green will be the thing, right? And you get these things into your head. But really, yeah, it was originally meant to just be a bit of news for our local group, the Singular Society of the Baker Street Dozen. hence the bakerstreetdozen.com. But for the most part, it was just me sort of reveling in all the stuff I was discovering and gathering, and what I was truly interested in. When in the early days, yeah, I was very, very attracted to the media thing. You know, here's the record of Sherlock Holmes, the most actors who have played a literary character, that sort of thing. And I was fascinated by it, and I couldn't believe there was really nothing out there that was, you know, profiles of various actors, and here's this Sherlockian, this actor stuff, and it was a bizarre thing. But it was the late '90s, and I was just sort of cutting my teeth trying to get some information out there. So yeah, I can well imagine it's the first thing that most Sherlockians in the wider Sherlockian world heard about this guy from Calgary.
Well, you know, a lot of, you know, the media is an entry point for a lot of people, and I mean, it's no secret I have a big interest in it, and it's just like you said. I mean, you know, Sherlocktron and Hounds of the Internet, that sort of thing was going, and then there was, what's this? Whoa.
Yeah, it did stick out
Big
a little
change.
bit. It was very different. I was trying to get as much media, you know, as many photographs as possible up there, trying to do a synopsis of this or that. I remember getting my hands on the Russian Sherlock Holmes series with Vasily Livanov and Vitaly Solomon, and only being able to get it without subtitles in the early days, and going through that.
Oh my goodness.
Trying to use an online Russian translator. Of course, I've got a little bit of Serbo-Croatian in my background, so I understood the odd thing. I'd ask my dad, hey, what does this mean? Again, because of the Serbo-Croatian thing. But I was one of the first people in the West to ever cover, you know, the Livanov stuff online.
Serious, yeah.
And that was fun. And at the time, of course, I was also, you know, frequenting the Scarlet Street message boards, the magazine, you know, the magazine Mystery and Horror.
Yep.
I'd run into people like David Morrell and David Stewart Davies in the forums, and David was writing for them, and Richard Valley was the editor. And at that time, those Matt Frewer films were just starting. They were in the planning stages, and they were all being filmed in Canada. And so I thought, okay, let's see if I can do something with any of this. Reached out to their publicity department and ended up, you know, developing a good line of communication with Odyssey Entertainment or Muse Entertainment, and eventually Hallmark Entertainment. But
didn't you end up being able to interview him or meet him or something? I mean, something happened with him, right?
Exactly. Reaching out with that, I just wanted the information to the website. But then Richard at Scarlet Street said, hey, you know, if you want to do interviews, we'll publish them, and, you know, we'll actually pay you this nominal rate of 2 cents a word or whatever it was at the time. And so I ended up arranging to interview Matt Frewer by telephone, Ken Welsh, the director Rodney Gibbons, and Richard at Scarlet Street took a couple of the interviews and a write-up on it. And that was my first ever paying gig as a Sherlockian writer.
It's a pretty good one.
It was kind of fun. It was a nice way to cut my teeth in our community. And again, yeah, it got me some recognition. Right. And the website, I kept on going with that for a while, but I haven't updated it in more than a decade. It's just not. Everybody else is doing this stuff now.
Right.
Social media.
True. I mean, everybody's own Facebook page is sort of a constant update of everything that's going on. But at the time, I noticed it, and I remember thinking, "Oh, who's this?"
Well, thank you.
Say, oh yeah. Well, I was delighted. I think the first time I met you was at the Wessex Press first. I think it was the first Gillette to Brett conference, and I remember thinking, "Oh, hey, this is the guy with the website. This is great."
Those were the early days of me getting out into the Sherlockian world. I think, what was that, 2003 or 2006? Yes. 2003.
I think it was 2003. Time flies. It's been
I
a long
think
time.
so, actually. Yeah, because I think that was the first year I did the BSI dinner in January, and then Gillette to Brett was in what, October, November?
Yeah, it was autumn.
It was in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at some point. So yeah, that was my first big foray out into organized Sherlockiana. And Gillette to Brett was a no-brainer, right? As soon as I saw the information, it's like, oh, this thing's media focused. Well, this is really in my wheelhouse. I must go. And so,
Yeah, it was great. I remember that vividly. The but you're it's not just media. I know that you are you you've had kind of a so many things to talk about. Let's talk about books, okay?
sure.
Um, Before we talk about books that you've been involved in editing and getting published and that sort of thing, let's talk about you used to sell books. You used to be a used, if I'm correct, used bookstore dealer
Not used, actually.
or a
It was new books.
mystery bookstore dealer.
Yeah, that's that spin-off of suddenly I found myself completely up to my neck in the world of Sherlock Holmes, and it's all I wanted to do, really. I mean, we're talking, oh boy, I was 22, I think, when I opened up Mad for Mystery Books in Calgary. I was at university at some point working on a degree in education and history, and all I could think about were the books, the Sherlockian books, the mystery books, everything tied with it. And so I dumped my studies and opened up a mystery bookstore in Calgary in I think it was June of 1990 that we opened up. And I was absolutely terrible as a bookseller. I, you know, I enjoy collecting too much, and I found myself kind of going, "Ooh, let's order this in, let's order that," and most of the stuff wasn't selling, but it was going home with me on the bookshelf.
Yeah,
I was my best customer, which is never a good
yeah,
thing.
that could be a problem. I could see
But
that.
it was an interesting start, and I only did it for about 5 years, which is to say I had to run out my lease. 3 months after we opened our doors, they put in 25-minute parking meters out front. I was just crushed, which is, I mean, that's not conducive to browsing in a bookstore. But one
No.
of the joys of that was that the publishers' reps would come through all the time. And one of them was Jeff Campbell. He was the publisher's rep for Berkeley Jove at the time, and he'd come see me, and we'd both sit there and talk, and just, neither of us was working terribly well at that point. And he wanted to open up a science fiction bookshop, to give up being a rep and open a science fiction shop. So I ended up moving Mad for a Mystery to another location, changed the name to Monkey's Paw Books, and Jeff was on the main floor, I was on the second floor, which was fine. Again, it didn't last terribly long. Neither of us were particularly great booksellers, but it was the beginning of a friendship and a relationship with Jeff that's carried on to the books that I've done as an editor, since he's ended up my co-editor, and we started all this together. He was also best man at my wedding. So yeah, we've got a kind of a long background together, but that was all a spin-off from being a bookseller.
Well, that's really interesting because I really can relate to your story. Not that I was ever a bookstore dealer, but I do sell books. And there's just a love of that sort of thing that just, I think, you want to work in that. You want to work with it, right? You want to do something. You want to collect them. You want to sell them, and then eventually, I think you get around to wanting to make them,
Well,
write them.
that's the other thing I've always found. Going back to our community, is that everybody's, I think, has this desire to add to the great wealth of literature, to give something back to the community that we get so much out of. So, we all find our way to do that, whether we're writing articles, whether we're, giving presentations, whether we're doing research, whatever it is. But for some of us, like yourself, myself, is the books. It's always the books, right? And if you can actually do something with a field that you're passionate about, all the better. And that's essentially that took me down the path of opening a bookstore, then editing books. And it was a funny twist. Originally, I thought I was just going to draw pictures and do an annual greeting card, or then a calendar after I did 12 of them. And then suddenly the thing shifted into editing and producing books.
Yeah, it's like one domino falls, Charles, and next thing you know, you're
Yep. But
well, let's talk about your books because I think they're great. I do.
Thank you.
This is my favorite, but I've got a lot of other ones over there.
Oh, yes, like more.
Yes, this is good. You can find it.
was
It's out there. You can get it, people. It's good. But let's talk about we'll talk about them specifically. There's a whole list, but let's talk about how you got to becoming a book editor.
Well, again, this I can lay this down at Jeff's feet. It was we were going through a period of really not doing a whole lot of anything, and I was between jobs. And Jeff was trying his hand writing fiction at the time. Science fiction was definitely his field of interest, but he loved mystery, loved the Sherlock Holmes stuff. We talked endlessly about it, and he pestered me and said, "Well, why don't we do something? Why don't we produce something?" And I thought, yeah, we can do that. And originally, we were also a little bit inspired, I think, by things like the Sherlock Holmes review out there, where I'm looking at this, I'm going, ooh, words and pictures, and this can be put together. What will I do? What will I do? And originally, I really wanted to do something that was just a journal of, news bits, things that would have been better served on a website anyway. But it ended up somehow narrowing down to just fiction. And I was involved on the Hounds of the Internet at the time, and of course, a few other places. And I thought, okay, let's do this. Let's do a traditional fiction piece. And that led to us self-producing and doing Curious Incidents, which I laid out in Word myself. We printed from Word. It was just, you make one change and suddenly everything shifted. It was 2 columns. I'm placing images and I had no idea what I was doing. But we turned around and said, okay, we'll do this. And then when I took it to the printer, I just wanted, the usual fold over staples down the side. The printer said, well, that's big enough or thick enough to do a perfect bound book. And suddenly it's like, okay, this is, sure, it's still skinny, but it's, it is a book, and it's all fiction.
Hold it up here so we can see it there, Charles. Hold it up so we there we go.
That was the first one. And then a year later, we did a second one, much thicker. But we were, you've got this circle of people that you're working with. Folks like Phil Cornell was out there ready to do illustrations. I put out a call to the Houndsell going, anybody want to try their hand at writing a pastiche like this, this, and this? And yeah, the stuff came pouring in. And I still remember.
When you put the call out for something,
it is, right?
There's always an anxiety. Oh my gosh, what if nobody, what if I throw a party and nobody comes? They always come. They do.
Oh, they do. They do. And it created a lot of interesting friendships and a whole lot of other things going on. I went to New York with the first one in 2003 when I was there for the dinner, and I was talking to some folks, and I still remember sitting there with George Vanderberg telling me, "Oh no, never print more than 100 copies of anything. You'll be selling those for the next 10 years. You'll have a box of books in your garage. Blah 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 blah." We sold out in 3 months. Again, this is the internet coming in and just trying to leverage that. So, and then the second one, we did 150 instead of 100 copies, and then reprinted both to a total of 250 of each. And those went, and that was fine. And then my taste shifted, and I wanted to do something that was a combination of my horror interests and my mystery interests, and just that whole Victorian Gothic sandbox sort of thing. Like in my mind's eye, Sherlock Holmes exists in the same place as Dracula, Jekyll and Hyde, Frankenstein, all these things.
Is there any question?
I blame the Universal movies, right? I mean, the Universal series, you had all these great horror figures, horror characters, and you had the Rathbone Bruce stuff, and they all just sort of, they
even shared the same sets and music sometimes.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
Let's talk about sharing a universe there.
So from there, then I wanted to shift away from the traditional and on to something that, brought those interests together, and that led to the Gaslight Grimoire. But we also got to the point where we thought we had enough going on and could attract pro writers out there that we could take this to a publisher rather than do it
Right.
ourselves.
Right. And I just want to we'll talk about that just for a moment, because first of all, it's a nice, great, big, thick book of really tremendously entertaining stories, and these are professional writers. I mean, they're I mean, there's names you would know here, and they're all, the subtitle is Fantastic Tales of Sherlock Holmes, and it is a sort of the supernatural stories involving Sherlock Holmes that, despite no ghosts need apply, here we are.
Yeah,
So,
that's the other thing I found, where the world is filled with an endless stream of knockoff pastiche that is very, very traditional, that and to me it got to the point where the harder you try to emulate Conan Doyle, the more you are setting yourself up to fail. So
right,
by
many are
moving,
called, but few are able to pull it off.
exactly. It's not an easy thing as much as people think so. So I found myself more and more interested in, where can we go with stuff? What kind of fun can we have? And the further you move away from the traditional, I think, it becomes a richer field of exploration. Writing can become more interesting when it's not bound to the very, very traditional format. And plus, it's just fun.
Charles, let's take a break. We need to hear from the sponsor. We're back. So, as we were saying,
I turned around and I thought, wow, what do I want to have in this book? Well, who are the authors that I really enjoy reading in the horror genre? And let's just give it a try. You start digging up email addresses and contacts, and of course by that point I think Facebook had come up, and you start connecting with folks. You follow your authors, and then it's
right.
just a point of going, hey, you want to write a Sherlock Holmes story? I mean, we'll pay you for it. It won't be a huge amount, but we'll pay you for it. You can write a Sherlock Holmes story if you've ever had the urge. And the shocking thing is finding out that everybody and their dog loves Sherlock Holmes. Right?
Right. I mean, everybody, I mean, when you think of the range of people, of authors who have, picked up the pen to write an adventure of Sherlock Holmes, and I'm not just talking about, I'm talking about
oh yeah,
yeah. I mean, it's big names. I mean, it's
surprising.
There.
Right? You never know till you ask, right? You can sit there and go, wow, nobody would have ever thought of me as a Sherlock Holmes author, but it's like, I thought so. So I asked. And people are always like, oh, I've always wanted to write one, but it's never been something that I could or would do. And so, yeah, that's how the Gaslight books came up.
Let me see. I jotted my list down here. I've got, now let me know, tell me if I'm missing one here, because I've got Gaslight Grimoire. I've got Grotesque, Gaslight Grotesque.
That's the second
Gaslight Arcanum.
Third one.
Gaslight Gothic. I think that's the one I might be missing.
Those are the four of them, yeah. Grimoire.
Yeah. Right. So I'll rectify that.
Grotesque.
Grotesque. And then
Arcanum, the first of the Dave Elsey covers, and Gothic, which was the 2018 book, and there will be a new one out next year, actually, which we're just getting started on. But there was also a couple of other sidelights. That the other choice that I went for was, of course, Challenger, which is one of my, I think it's one of the great triumphs, was getting a Challenger book published and out there. And
that
also,
is fantastic.
I had so much fun with that one.
I would like to get that cover as a poster. I'm just telling you.
Yeah, I really should talk to Dave and see about making those available. It's such a staggeringly good image.
Oh my
It is
gosh. Right.
just so neat.
So if you're a Professor Challenger fan out there, everybody, um, that that's the way. Yeah. Yes. It's a collection of Challenger pastiche, and they're really fun. Of course, Challenger's quite a character, so you can really chew the scenery and have some fun.
And you can go in really bizarre places with Challenger that you wouldn't do with Holmes too.
Right.
Right?
Very true. Now there was also a collection. I do have this of Beyond the Rue Morgue. Was that one?
Oh,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, one of the writers who we had in one of our Gaslight books, he was keen on getting the Rue Morgue book out there and asked me to co-edit with him. That was Paul Kane in the UK, and we did that one for Titan Books. And that too was a whole hell of a lot of fun because you've got that similarity. I mean, Dupin is Sherlock Holmes of an earlier day, and you can have a whole lot of fun with him too, and then play with that Edgar Allan Poe vibe.
Right. I love this. I mean, I just love these books. I think they're very entertaining, and of course, they're right in my wheelhouse too. So I just love all that kind of stuff, and so I just love the origin story of that too. Though it's like I'm going to do this, and somebody liked it enough to suggest you do something else with it, with these things, and then that's what happens. Then you're off and running, and it's
Yeah, and then suddenly it was like the bookstore thing. I'm just going to try this, and you're up to your neck in it, and you just enjoy it. And for me, half the fun of doing these is the writers I get to work with. I get to read stories before anybody else does, and that to me is that's the coolest thing. Stuff comes in, I print it off, hit the couch, and start going through it, and you just get those little butterflies in your belly kind of going, wow, they got it. They knew what I wanted. They delivered what I wanted.
There's always that thrill when the case of book shows up on your doorstep and you open it up and there it is.
Yeah.
There it is. I've said this before in other locations, but it's like, and here's the thing that did not exist before. And now it's here. Yeah. It's wonderful.
Oh yeah. There's a pride to that. And then there's just the exaltation at here I got to give my stuff back, right? I got to give back to the community, right? And then finding out, that when they sell, you're kind of happy to know that yes, my take on it isn't just me.
Selling it is that's a nice affirmation that somebody else is appreciating what you're doing. But really, it is, like you mentioned, you get to communicate with writers. I love that part of of all of this stuff is the people and the experiences that this hobby in general and publishing within it or whatever people do in it. Often think of the people who we have all been blessed to have met over the years, not just famous people, because that does happen if you really get very active in the community, but also just the friendships that you make, and the opportunities that arise from meeting new people and having the opportunity to interact and kind of trade ideas and spark each other's imaginations and inspire each other. I think I just love stories like you're telling, because it's just what I love about all of this. It's
such a neat thing when the surprise hits. Your mindset wasn't there. Then you meet somebody, you talk to them, and it's like, ooh, let's do this. Let's go. Right?
Oh, right, exactly. Or you meet somebody and go, I could do that. I'm going to try something like that. Or I don't know. And then I love, I'm just going to write this author and ask him to write a story for my book.
That's simple. Then, of course, I also, of course, started attending things like World Fantasy Convention, and you spend your time, which is almost more of a trade show, which is to say it's authors, editors, but obviously with a lot of readers there. But I also spent a lot of time sitting in the bar just shooting, talking and drinking, and you get the best amount of business done in that setting.
Right.
really
That's the
regret the
most
fact.
fun.
I was supposed to be in the UK at StokerCon in up near Whitby last year in April, but of course couldn't go. And to me, half of that was going to be plying people in the bar to write me a story, write me a story.
Right. One, it is the most fun of any of these events, and two, that lets you write off your bar tab. So there you go.
Yeah. That is how it works. Yeah.
That works. That's how that works. So, speaking of horror, uh, I just remember one weekend in New York City. Speaking of sitting around afterwards, drinking and visiting and that sort of thing, and in somebody's hotel room, and hearing you just almost as an aside, in passing, mention that you had worked on the website for Christopher Lee, the great, well, not only the great horror actor for Hammer Studios, but also a Sherlockian actor as well. And I remember hearing that and kind of tucking that away. And I don't think I've ever asked you about it before, but I'm asking you about it now. So tell that, because I think that's just kind of really cool.
In essence, just another fandom interest. I was very heavily interested in, I mean, as I was doing my Sherlock Holmes stuff online in 1999 or whatever it was, oh, excuse me, I also had a very strong interest in Hammer horror films and was joining a lot of forums and groups and things, and ended up, the Christopher Lee web was just being put together by Christopher Lee's son-in-law, Juan Aneros. He's married to Christopher Lee's daughter, Christina. And he wanted to create a presence for Lee online. And he did that. And of course, I joined. I was a member and I was enjoying it. And Juan Spanish. English was not his first language. And so he'd get these news bits. He'd talk to his father-in-law and say, "What are you working on?" And then write it up and put it out on the website. And it was the official thing. But Juan's English had its moments. So, of course, I'd catch him out on it. And it got to the point where he'd say, "Okay, look, how about you just edit the news for us? You can do all this. I'll give you all the information. You just put it up and get it on the web." And so I did that. And part of that was that, you know, you do video chats occasionally, and you're sitting there. I remember doing an impression of Christopher Lee for Christopher Lee. It was very, very strange. I was sitting there doing I've been in this business for more than 54 years, blah, 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 right? Doing this sort of thing and having Christopher Lee laugh at that and just give you feedback. Bad impression it is. And that was fine. That went on for a couple years, and then that eventually shut down. And then in 2007, I think it was 2007, Chris and I were heading over to London. And out of the blue, I thought, okay, I'll just drop a line to Juan and see if he's around, what's going on. Wow, Juan sent me, he's like, okay, we could do this. Mr. Lee is speaking at the Millennium Dome for some comic expo thing. He's going to sing. So, but we'll get you a press pass. We'll send a car. We'll bring you out, and you can meet with him.
Did you say he's going to sing?
Yep. Yeah. Christopher Lee fancied himself an opera singer, and a frustrated opera singer in his younger days. And for some reason, Juan kept banging that drum. And Lee, in his later days, was doing stuff like on some Euro heavy metal album and doing some odd little songs here and there, recording and releasing them. Like he did one, what was it, Heroes and Villains or something, and a whole CD of him singing. Like he's doing covers of Ghost Riders in the Sky, that sort of thing. And
I gotta find this.
Yeah. So yeah, he was doing this gig. He didn't want to talk Dracula. He didn't want questions about that stuff, but he was gonna sing. So that was fine. I was all for that. So they sent a car when we were there in May of 2007 and took me out there. We sat there. He sang like 2 songs and then was really frustrated with everything. Said, "Oh, not feeling well." Canceled the rest of the thing. After you've got, I don't know how many hundreds of people were sitting there waiting for 2 hours before he'd go. But then they just called me and said, come backstage. So we went backstage and ended up hanging out with Christopher Lee, chatting with him. He was an incredibly charming man. He could seem rather cold and remote and stuff, but when you're talking to him one-on-one, he was a really interesting man and always paid attention to the people he was speaking to. You know, we're there talking and he says, well, I did a tour through Canada when I was a young man. Winnipeg is really cold. I remember the snow. And you're having this kind of a conversation. And I'm like, this is Christopher Lee, and we're talking about how horribly cold it is in Winnipeg. It's one of those neat moments. Right?
Yeah.
And the other fun thing when doing the editing for the website was I got to read Jonathan Rigby's biography of Lee well before publication. And I was the first person who knew he was playing a guy called Count Dooku because George Lucas wrote the foreword on that book. And I'm reading this before it came out what the name was of the character.
Wow.
And neat.
That's
fun stuff.
Yeah, that is really fun. It's fun.
Yeah, horror, Holmes. I mean, he made no bones about it. One of the proudest moments of Christopher Lee's life was being in Billy Wilder's private life. It completely changed his position or even how he thought of himself, right? Suddenly he's doing work with a big director, like a director he admired. He wasn't doing exploitation stuff. It wasn't another Dracula. And he was very, very thankful for that role back in the day, and it was a big turning point for him. So Sherlock Holmes, well, playing Mycroft anyway, was a real big deal for him.
That's so interesting.
We didn't talk about his golden years of Sherlock Holmes stuff because the less said, the better.
Yeah.
But it was a neat period. It was fun.
There might be a good movie in those TV movies if you really give it a merciless edit. I think there might
very
be.
very merciless.
Yeah. But that's
the
so interesting.
Like 4 hours initially or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Those Harmony Gold things were silly.
Right. Well, that's so interesting it's interesting about the private life, but it's also really interesting, that opportunity. I love stories like that. That's really...
but the worst thing was at the end of this, after we're done, Juan came to me and says, it was the day before Lee's 80-something birthday. And they said, well, we're going to have a little celebration. Do you and Chris want to come? And I'm sitting there going, no. Because we were scheduled, that same weekend was the Sherlock Holmes Society of London mini weekend, and we were scheduled to be at the Magic Circle that evening at a special function that was there. And, if I hadn't been scheduled for that, and it was tempting to blow that off, but for Christopher Lee, but yeah, just couldn't do it. Still had to do the Sherlock Holmes thing.
Yeah. Ugh. No, Mr. Lee, I have a previous engagement. That sucks.
It's a crazy world sometimes, right? You find yourself.
Did you ever think you'd say that?
Would you like to come and celebrate with us? No, sorry, I can't.
Yeah, I got something better to do.
I have this other engagement.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the long run, I kind of wish I'd have gone for it, but.
Yeah, well, it's a good story, though. Well, believe it or not, Charles, we're getting close to the end. I knew this would happen.
No.
Yeah. So I just want to ask you a couple questions. So you're very active in all kinds of things. What do you have on the horizon? Is there anything I think you alluded to something coming. What do you have coming in?
Well, we are just in the point where we are starting another Gaslight book. We're looking at tentatively Gaslight Ghouls, Uneasy Tales of Sherlock Holmes, Monsters, and Madmen. But we're just getting started on that. And that is with a different publisher, Belanger Books, actually. And this should be a fun and interesting thing to get back into and get the ball rolling again. In this past year, we haven't done much. The only thing I've done is write an introduction for a collection of stories for one of our writers, Stephen Voke. I did that last year. The book just came out, Under a Raven's Wing, which is the apprenticeship of Sherlock Holmes. That's that one right there. And that's one of those spin-off things that came out of the years of doing the Gaslight books, is the relationship with particular authors. And when you think the work's good, you want to support that. So in the
Right.
last little while, that's one of the few things I've done. What else have we got going on? I don't think
It
that
may be
there's
an
a
unfair question. Coming out of a pandemic, everybody's sort of in low gear. We haven't really ramped up yet. So,
well, that's been one of the weird things is you sit there and it's like, okay, am I going to do a book right now? I can't really have a launch. I can't, what do you do? Are people even interested? Where are we going to be at this point? But now once, you can see that there's an end in sight and life will continue. So it's time to get back in the game and do that sort of thing.
yeah,
So,
it's true. I know on a variety of Sherlockian fronts, both with the Irregulars and with Wessex Press. First half of all of last year, and even the first half of this year was kind of low gear. But I can you can kind of feel it starting to gear up around
yeah,
the
yeah.
world, really.
I won't say there's something in the air, but that's kind of what it
Yeah,
does feel like we're at the point where it's time to get back to work and
yeah.
get back out there. And I mean, yeah, for you, you've announced your new imprint, right? What, the Night Shift books?
Right. We've got Night Shift books. I'm very excited about that. You can hear all about
Or
that in the previous episode here. But it's yeah. I think a Gaslight book would be a perfect fit.
there's a thought there, but
There you go. Well, Charles, we really are just about out of time. So I want to thank you for being on the show today. This is always a treat. I miss seeing my friends in person. And so this is sort of the next best thing to being there. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in person. And I love the after hour room parties, and that's where some of the best stuff
we've
happens.
had some fun conversations that way, and I really miss that
We
sort of
do.
thing.
We
Actually,
do
whether
indeed.
in New York or in Indianapolis,
Right.
Minnesota, wherever it is,
Wherever.
doesn't matter. There's always that level of conversation
Yeah,
and
there's
that
always a few
level.
good things to hash out.
Yeah, this is great. It's just been so much fun to be able to chat with you about these
Yeah,
things. And yeah, we do have a whole lot of overlap.
we do. We'll have to talk about that a little further, I think. Well, take care. We're going to draw this to a close, and I do look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks very much, Steve. It's been my pleasure. Take care.
Charles. And that's it for this episode of the Fortnightly Dispatch. I want to again thank Charles, and I also want to let you know that we are coming to the end of the second season of the Fortnightly Dispatch. We have one episode left in the second season, and you will not want to miss it. It's going to be unique. That's all I'll say for now. I know you'll be back to see this extra special episode. Beyond the next episode, we will be taking a bit of a break, and then we will return in the autumn with a whole new set of fantastic guests. Until then, I just want to say thank you for all your wonderful feedback. We have a growing subscriber list on our YouTube channel, and I know a lot of people are beginning to follow the show. I've dug into some of the statistics, and the reach of the show is impressive. And so we're very grateful. And of course, your direct feedback and your Facebook comments, and for you subscribers, your comments on the YouTube channel. They're all noticed. And believe me, we're very grateful. So until next time, take care, and we'll see you then.